She stood at the school gates every morning for 8 years, watching privileged parents brush past her like she was part of the furniture. They never knew she could recite Shakespeare by heart or solve calculus in her head, until the day the education minister called her by name and everything changed. The autumn morning air carried the sharp scent of fresh chalk and industrial disinfectant as Cheryl Anderson approached Lincoln Elementary's front entrance, her worn leather satchel heavy with lesson plans she'd spent the weekend perfecting. The fluorescent security lights cast harsh shadows across the concrete steps, making her dark skin appear almost gray in the artificial dawn. Parents in designer coats swept past her without a glance, their children clutching iPads and organic lunchboxes, while she fumbled for her faculty ID with fingers that trembled slightly in the October cold. She'd been teaching here for 8 years, 8 years of arriving early, staying late, of watching her students' faces light up when complex concepts finally clicked. 8 years of being the teacher other faculty members forgot to invite to lunch, the one whose innovative lesson plans were quietly adopted by colleagues who never credited her contributions. The security guard, a young white man named Derek, barely looked up from his phone as she approached the checkpoint. "Bapple." "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification," he said, his tone carrying the casual authority of someone who had never been questioned. His eyes flicked over her pressed navy skirt, her carefully ironed blouse, the stack of textbooks balanced in her arms, and somehow found her lacking. "I work here," Cheryl said quietly, digging through her purse for the badge she'd worn every day for nearly a decade. "I'm Mrs. Anderson, 4th grade." Derek scrolled through something on his tablet, his brow furrowed in exaggerated concentration. "Sorry, but I don't see your name on today's staff list. New security protocols. Can't let anyone in who's not on the approved roster." A group of parents behind her began to murmur, their whispers creating a buzz like angry wasps. Someone pulled out a phone and started recording. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the asphalt and releasing the smell of yesterday's rain, mixed with exhaust fumes from idling SUVs. Cheryl felt the familiar weight of invisibility settling over her shoulders like a heavy coat. She could walk away now, avoid the scene that was building around her like storm clouds. Instead, she noticed a small girl near the flagpole, tears streaming down her face as she clutched a backpack nearly as big as she was. "Excuse me," Cheryl said to Derek, then walked over to the child. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" "I can't find my mommy," the girl hiccuped. "She dropped me off, but I don't know where my classroom is." Cheryl knelt down, her voice gentle. "What's your teacher's name?" Within minutes, she had walked the child to Mrs. Patterson's room, helped her hang up her jacket, and explained the mix-up to the confused teacher. When she returned to the entrance, a small crowd had gathered. "Who called the police?" Principal Morrison was saying into her phone, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I specifically said we don't need— Yes, I understand security protocols, but—" 2 officers were already walking up the sidewalk, their radios crackling with morning dispatch calls. The parents who had been filming were now posting to social media, hashtags already forming in their minds. Cheryl stood perfectly still, her hands folded in front of her, watching her professional reputation dissolve in real time. "Bama." "Ma'am, we've got reports of an unauthorized person attempting to enter the school," the first officer said, his hand resting casually on his belt. His partner was younger, nervous, scanning the crowd like he expected trouble to materialize from the suburban morning. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding," Principal Morrison began, but her voice lacked conviction. Cheryl could see it in the woman's eyes, the calculation, the relief that someone else might solve this awkward problem for her. After all, there were budget cuts coming, teacher evaluations due. One less complication. The sound of car doors slamming cut through the tension like a knife. A black sedan with government plates had pulled into the visitor parking space, followed by a second vehicle. The morning light caught the state seal emblazoned on the license plate as a tall, distinguished man in a charcoal wool coat emerged from the back seat. Education Minister David Lawson moved with the unhurried confidence of someone accustomed to rooms falling silent at his approach. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his shoes polished to mirror brightness, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of decades in public service. But he stopped dead when he saw Cheryl standing between the 2 police officers, her chin raised with quiet dignity. "Mrs. Anderson?" The name dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. Everyone turned, parents lowered their phones, the officers stepped back. Even the morning traffic seemed to hush as Lawson approached her with an expression of disbelief, transforming into something deeper: recognition, gratitude, wonder. "David?" Cheryl's voice was barely a whisper. "David Lawson." He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew something small and worn. A teacher's badge, its plastic edges cracked with age, the photo faded but still recognizable. "I kept this," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "In the 32 years I've carried it, the badge of the woman who taught me to read when no one else believed a kid from foster care was worth the effort." The crowd pressed closer, phones now capturing a different story entirely. Principal Morrison's face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. Derek was staring at his tablet like it held the secrets of the universe. "You were 8 years old," Cheryl said, tears flowing freely now. "At the Riverside Children's Home. You couldn't sit still, couldn't focus. Everyone said you had learning disabilities. You stayed after your shift ended every day for 6 months," Lawson continued, his voice growing stronger. "You brought your own books, your own materials. You never gave up on me." He turned to face the assembled crowd, his coat billowing slightly in the morning breeze. "This woman is the reason I learned to love learning. She's the reason I became a teacher, then a principal, then a superintendent. She's the reason I'm standing here today as your education minister." He walked over to Derek, who was now frantically scrolling through different screens on his tablet. "Young man, you just tried to bar one of the finest educators in this state from entering her own workplace. I suggest you update your protocols immediately." Then, turning to Principal Morrison, "I came here today to announce a new initiative, a $12 million program to identify and support undervalued teachers across the state. I can't think of a better place to launch it than right here, right now, with the woman who inspired it." The next hour became a blur of handshakes, interviews, and photographs. Local news crews arrived as if summoned by magic. Parents who had watched silently as she was questioned now lined up to introduce themselves, to ask about their children's progress, to invite her to coffee. Derek had mysteriously disappeared, though rumors spread quickly that he'd been reassigned to the parking garage. But the moment that stayed with Cheryl came later, during the official announcement ceremony. As Minister Lawson spoke about the importance of recognizing excellence regardless of background or bias, she noticed something in the crowd. 3 young teachers of color, notebook in hand, tears in their eyes, watching someone who looked like them, being celebrated instead of questioned. After the cameras packed up and the officials drove away, Cheryl found herself alone in her classroom for the first time all day. The afternoon light streamed through windows she had washed herself last weekend, illuminating the inspirational posters she'd paid for with her own money, the small library she'd built book by book from garage sales and teacher supply stores. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a folder she'd kept for decades, letters from former students, photos from graduation ceremonies, a note from David Lawson's foster mother thanking her for giving her boy a second chance at life. She had never imagined that kindness could compound like interest, growing stronger over time until it became powerful enough to change systems. Her phone buzzed with a text from Minister Lawson. "The scholarship program we discussed will be named the Anderson Initiative for Educational Excellence. Thank you for teaching me that every child deserves to be seen." Outside her window, the afternoon shift of parents was arriving for pickup. She watched them through the glass, remembering how invisible she had felt just 12 hours earlier. Tomorrow, she knew, some of them would see her differently. But more importantly, somewhere in the crowd, there was probably another teacher like her, brilliant and dedicated and unnoticed, waiting for their moment to step out of the shadows. She closed the folder and began preparing for the next day's lessons. Because that's what teachers do. They plant seeds in the dark, trusting that someday, somewhere, they will bloom in the light. The bronze plaque by the school entrance, installed 3 months later, read, "The Anderson Center for Educational Innovation, where every teacher is seen, every student is valued." But Cheryl knew the real monument wasn't made of metal. It was made of moments, of small acts of recognition, rippling outward like stones thrown into still water, creating waves that would reach shores she'd never see. Late that evening, as she locked her classroom door and walked past the new plaque, Cheryl whispered a promise to the empty hallway. "Let those still in the shadows be seen sooner." Her reflection in the polished bronze smiled back at her. No longer invisible, finally home. Talent doesn't depend on the color of your skin, the sound of your name, or the address on your paycheck. Remember this story the next time you're tempted to look past someone who might change the world, if only you take the time to really see them.